curious, when you first read the book Killer Angels, what were your first impressions? If you can put them in a few sentences, what were your first impressions and feelings? Because that had to have been very inspiring.
Yeah, well, it grabbed me on in the subconscious place first. The way a fine piece of music can grab you, and you don't know why, but you're captivated by, I guess, great literature, poetry, music. It works that way. It grabs you somewhere in your subconscious. It engages you there, like a Bach cantata. You don't have to understand the German, but it engages you. And certainly this is the experience I had with this particular novel. What distinguishes the experience for me from other novels I may have read over the years is that I also felt, as I was reading it, a compulsion to tell this story on film. I felt this story needs to be told on film, and I felt in some way that I needed to tell it, a very personal thing, that I needed to tell this story. And in the subsequent years, of course, one didn't know it was going to take 14 and a half or 15 years to get it finally to the screen, but it could have taken 30 years, or it could have taken a lifetime, or it could never have been brought to the screen. But in that moment, I felt this strong urge to tell the story, and I didn't think of time or place or, the measure of the commitment. It was just that it has to be told, and it was an imperative. And for me, it became, or it turned into, a kind of a mission. And where almost all other considerations were put aside in the interest of getting this done. And as delighted as I am that it is being told, even if it wasn't being told on film, I would feel, as I did feel, in those moments when it looked like it wasn't going to be done, it wouldn't be financed, it wouldn't be done anytime soon, it would still have been a worthwhile endeavor to try to get done. And I've learned that you can't measure things by weeks or months or even years or even, in this case, decades. It's measured by your passion and your commitment, and that's what takes you forward. So undoubtedly, it struck a deep chord in me. The book has had that effect on countless other people. And it's one of those combinations of a really fine piece of literature that stands on its own, coupled or reinforced or magnified, if you will, by our association with this particular historical event, which also stands on its own, the Battle of Gettysburg, quite apart from the piece of literature called The Killer Angels. And all this together was extremely compelling for me, and I immediately came to understand and have great sympathy for the characters. And I suppose getting to know them over the years and living with them in kind of my psychic imagination, I've grown very close to them. And so finally, all these years later, when they could be embodied by actors who bring their own humanity to the roles, it was very very mystical, really, to see these people really come to life, embodied with these life and blood people.
Are there any particular moments that sort of, maybe with Sheen, when you saw him, any particular moments where it hit you, that sort of mystical sort of?
Yeah, it's probably hit me the hardest, in particular with, if you mentioned Martin Sheen. We have always been concerned, as we cast people, that they look not only right, like because we have, of course, photographs of nearly every character was photographed during the Civil War. So it's not only a question of authenticity, but also that we capture the reality of a man, and then also beyond the kind of physical reality, the spirit of who that person was. And I talk a lot with the actors in our work about entering into the moral universe of these characters, which goes much far beyond the uniform and the hair and makeup. It goes into the thinking and the feeling and the morality, what these people cared about, which is what the actor has to bring to it. And collectively, all the actors then create this 19th century world with its concerns and its fears and its passions. And when I first saw Marty Sheen in his makeup, our first makeup test, when it was still rudimentary, comparatively rudimentary, the beard wasn't finely fixed, and the mustache and the hair, all that stuff, because of course he needed a hairpiece and the whole 9 yards to get him to look like Robert E. Lee. But when I saw in the makeup test, what was even more impressive than the very fine work of the makeup artist was the look in Marty Sheen's eye. And I thought, wow, this is Robert E. Lee. And that was, I remember we all looked at those slides early on before we started shooting, and we were all captivated.
I'm wondering if you had any particular interest before this book in the Civil War, and if so, what that was.
I suppose I have had that interest, and that my dad took me around to historical sites at a very early age. I don't remember going to that many Civil War sites, but he certainly took me to French and Indian War sites and Revolutionary War sites like Ticonderoga and Saratoga, those kind of places, and also read a lot to me in my youth, a lot of history and a lot of literature, and then of course when I started going to school, I then picked up the habit and read on my own. So I've always been interested in history, not just American history, but world history, and literature, and good history when it's really well written. So yes, I've had this kind of background of an interest, and some of the projects that I've been interested in doing over the years are also from a historical nature. But also, I see these things, and I approach this project as something that's very vital and living and present, and of an immediate relationship, so it's not like something far away. It's very close. I feel very close to these characters and to their concerns, and I think one of the things, again, compelling about the novel or about his history, when we look at history, sometimes we can see ourselves with greater clarity, because we're so confused by the present. The issues are so contradictory, and we're riddled with ambivalence and uncertitude, and there's so many. It's so complex when we look at the issues of our own lives and our own families and our own towns and our own society, to try to sort things out. So sometimes if we go back 50, 100 years, 1,000 years, we can distill the moment or crystallize the moment. They too lived, obviously, in equally confusing, contradictory, sophisticated times, but we can look back and see, kind of distill the moment and start to understand things maybe about ourselves, which is, of course, what great drama is all about, great theater is all about. And so by going back into the Civil War, which is not that long ago, it's a hair's breadth, in historical terms. It's this morning in terms of the human family. We can begin to see ourselves today and recognize ourselves, and at the same time look at who are these very strange, bizarre people who could run up against cannon fire, that they could believe in something so profoundly that they'd be willing to kill or be killed, to take another life or sacrifice their own life for a cause. And that is something that's very bizarre to us in the 80s and 90s. And at the same time, we recognize it. At the same time that we know there's some kind of dormant muscles or psycho beings in ourselves which say, yeah, I could do that. I could do it for something. I could do it for my family, for my kids. So there's a situation where I would do that, or something I believe in. It's just kind of dormant. And so we explore this in The Killer Angels, this kind of zealotry, or this kind of idealism, this kind of belief system, where people get caught up into something that's bigger than their own lives. In an age where very few things are bigger than our own lives in the 1990s, or we're coming out of this me decade or so forth, this kind of egocentrism. And I, as a filmmaker, I'm not commenting on whether it's good or bad. It's not my interest to do that, but it's to raise these kind of questions. What makes us similar to these people? What makes us different from these people? And it is so poignant, because looking at it, it's a sophisticated time, certainly, as sophisticated as any time, but there's a certain naivete about the 19th century. And people, and there is more of a clarity about kind of right and wrong. people were not as confused as we are today about moral issues, about right and wrong. And they were ready to take a stand for these belief systems. And one of the ironies about the Killer Angels is that every one of the characters, we understand them, we identify with them, we have great sympathy for them, we care about them. And yet every character embodies the killer and the angel in the human being. Every character is quite exemplary, quite likable. We're attracted by them, all the Confederates, all the Yankees. We admire them, their zeal, their passion, their commitment. At the same time, they're all killers. They're all, and each and every one of them is willing to kill for what they believe in. The Northerners, they're abolitionist zealots, personified by Joshua Chamberlain, and he finds slavery such a blight on humanity that he's willing to kill people by the thousands to eradicate slavery. His own brothers, figuratively speaking. And the Southerners believe so deeply in states' rights and in live and let live, which is, again, a deep strain in the American character, that they also are willing to kill other people to defend that right. And so you have this situation, this tragic situation, where people are really very closely related to the same moral universe, the same religions, more or less, the same belief systems, same culture. This is remarked on by in one of the scenes between Fremantle, the English observer, and Longstreet, where it remarks on how sad it is that people with so many similarities can be ripped apart and at each other's throats in this desperate, bloody struggle.
We could go back for just a second to the Killer Angels kind of concept, because I haven't gotten quite from people yet exactly what, on tape, what that reference comes from. It comes from a Shakespeare play. Could you just kind of go over that again?
What a piece of work is man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in aspiration how like an angel, in action how like a god. From Hamlet. And this is quoted in the novel by Chamberlain, and in the novel his father, in this kind of flashback of this snowscape in Maine, says, well, if he's an angel, he must be a murdering angel. And we changed the scene around, because we don't have any flashbacks to Maine or where the characters come from, to where the scene that is put in the context of Joshua Chamberlain and his aide-de-camp Kilrain, this Irish immigrant Kilrain. And Kilrain now says, in the context of that, after they've met the runaway slave, and they're pondering one of the issues of the war, which is the abolition of slavery, and they start talking about race and about differences or similarities between races and why they're fighting. And in this exploration, you know, they say men are men, you know, races are men. And Chamberlain quotes Shakespeare, and then Kilrain says, well, if he's an angel, he damn well must be a killer angel. And that again is the irony and the paradox and the dilemma here. That all these men who care so much and who are really so selfless in many respects, are willing to lay down their own life for their causes, at the same time are willing to take life. They're willing to kill. And through the, and this is the tragedy of it, that how do we let things get so out of control that it's left to soldiers to decide, to settle the issues by, in this case, the case of the American Civil War, shedding blood on a scale unprecedented, you know, as was pointed out by many times before, and should be continued to be pointed out, that there was more American bloodshed in the American Civil War than all other wars combined, from the American Revolution through Vietnam. It was a catastrophe of monumental proportions. What happens that we citizens, let's not even say those politicians, we citizens, what happens to our sense of responsibility that we allow this to happen? Things get so out of control that it comes to this. And I think as a filmmaker, you can't answer these kind of enormous questions in a film. I don't believe I can, or a film can. Other filmmakers are into answering questions, and we need all kind of filmmakers. I believe my role as a filmmaker is to pose questions. We ask these questions in 90 minutes or 180 minutes. We ask them through the emotional language of film. And then, as citizens, we can start to debate and maybe come up with some answers. But the questions need to be asked. And the Killer Angels is one very big, compelling question about how the very best and the very brightest and the very finest among us can get caught up in such tragedy, such monumental, horrific tragedy.
It's something, there's something about the Civil War. What is it? What do you think it is? And is there a simple answer to this? About the Civil War that just grabs us?
I think it's a few things. I think it's a place we want to go. It's a place we want to live in, and it's, you know, it's personified most vividly by the reenactors, without whom we could not have made this film, who don the uniform at their own expense, make their uniform and accoutrements and weapons, and go and live out in these encampments and live in a 19th century world. I think it's a kind of an escape. It's an escape, and I'm not loading the word escape with any kind of negative sentiment. It's even though it seems like it would be, because it's a departure. It's getting away from a world of very confused, almost non-existent moral standards, where just kind of anything goes world that we live in now, and to a place where things seem to have been more defined. Some of this is probably an illusion, because people always had complicated lives, no matter when they lived, and they always had problems, and they always will. That's pretty obvious. But at the same time, it seems to be a simpler world and a more defined world than we live in now. So going into it, we can say, well, here's the right, here's the wrong, here's where people lived, and it was a simpler time. And so I think part of it is that. But then again, you could say that about the early 19th century or about the 17th century. Why the Civil War? I think the Civil War period, again, it's one of the basic stories of humankind, which is fratricide, it's one of those handful of Greek tales that come down to us from the Greeks, from the great Greek dramatists, that are retold and retold and retold every generation. And this Civil War is the embodiment of that story of brother against brother, and it's so vivid and so recent and so close to us, and at the same time, although it's a universal tale, and I think The Killer Angels as a film one will emotionally get it, even if one doesn't know American history. If one watches it in Greece or in Albania or in South America, you'll get it, the emotional life of it. But it's also, for Americans, has this particular poignancy because it was the war that was fought in our own backyards, in our own households. And certainly any American family that is here from the 1860s, that dates their relationship, their ancestry from the 1860s, was touched by it. Every family was touched by it, virtually. It had a relative that was lost in that war, one way or the other. Certainly the Confederacy. The Confederacy, it's more vivid. The old southern states, it's more vivid because they were because of the lost cause, so to speak, and a lost way of life, and being conquered and dominated by, as they saw it at the time, a foreign power, which was the North. But the entire eastern seaboard was caught up in that conflagration. So again, it belongs to us in a very vivid sense. Although many families were, involved and had sacrifices put on them in the wars since, and this was the war that was fought here. And you can go up and down the eastern seaboards and visit all these battlefields. So I think, for all these reasons, the American Civil War has a certain resonance, and also because the issues of the Civil War were never really decided. And we have a feeling that before the Civil War there were a collection of sovereign states, and at the Civil War the country was finally born in this crucible of death, and the country kind of began with the termination of the Civil War. And all these same issues, basically, of states' rights and live and let live and rugged individualism versus this kind of federalism and government care and government being involved in things. These issues, we're fighting them out in every presidential campaign, in every by-election, in every congressional campaign. And also this dualism in the American character is vividly portrayed in the American Civil War. Joshua Chamberlain represents this crusading zealot that has to right every wrong. In the case of the Civil War, it's the abolition of slavery. But you could say it's the same thing that takes us to the beaches of Normandy in the face of fascism. It's the same thing that takes us to Vietnam and the rice paddies in the face of communism, those kind of despotisms. The same thing that takes us to Iraq. I mean, we can say, well, okay, we might have some interest in oil, protecting the oil flow, but at the same time, to be fair, a lot of the sentiment that motivated us to go to Iraq was this despot that was oppressing his own people and threatening his neighbors. And there's something in the American character that says, you know, we can't let that stand. We must stand up against the bully. This is what takes Joshua Chamberlain down to fight at Gettysburg. And on the other side, part of all of us, again, is the side that identifies with Robert E. Lee and Longstreet and Armistead and Pickett, which is, hey, I mind my own business, you mind yours. I don't want anybody, a king or a tyrant or a president or a politician to tell me how to live my life. And that also is a very strong strain in the American character. And we live with these issues today. So all these issues that were fought on the battlefields of Gettysburg and Antietam and Shiloh, in a large sense, are still with us and are still very much in our concerns.
Yes, I agree. I'd like to go back. You've had a very long history, and I'm wondering, with this, I know you went to Europe and stuff, looking for locations and stuff at one point.
Well, I remember the inspirational moments. There have been many. When it looked like it was going to be a hard, long road, and it was. It has been. When people just who gave me encouragement. That's what I remember. And you know, I hope that the making of this film, quite apart from whatever value it has intrinsically, but the making of it can be a reminder to anyone who has a project they care about to stick with it. Because at the end of the day, I think it's really what matters, to spend one's life the way one chooses to spend it, and to define it yourself, and not have other people tell you how to spend your life, what to do with your life, or even to qualify it or quantify it. That's for each of us to decide. And yeah, this was tough, and it required sacrifice, but never a sacrifice I was unwilling to make. And you know, going through my bank account, or selling my house, or not working for many years, which were the prices I had to pay to get this done, we're still, and I don't mean to sound melodramatic, but it's the fact of it is there's still small sacrifices compared to the men who really were at Gettysburg in 1863 and what they sacrificed. And so I always remembered that when I thought, oh, poor me, this is very hard, and how come the studios aren't rushing to do this marvelous script, you know, which every filmmaker thinks about every project they have, you know, and why aren't they all rushing at my door and, you know, and getting this thing produced? You know, I thought, well, you know, this is still not as hard as forced marches and meager rations and the cold and the heat and the dust and running up the field at the angle being shot at with canister fire and musketry. So I always remembered about the people who were really there and the characters, and these characters, these real characters, but who lived as fiction in Michael Sharro's novel. They kind of took me through it. They took me through it. Armistead and Pickett and Lee, and they just took me through it. And then in addition to that, friends took me through it, and I remember moments along the way. I remember back in '84, I was working on various incarnations of the screenplay, and we had a reading. I decided I needed to hear it. I mean, I got to a point where I couldn't do any more rewrites without hearing it, and Richard Jordan and I collected a number of actor friends, and we had a reading in L.A., and I was moved by the fact that about 30 actors gave up an evening, and everyone is busy, to get together and read this. And it took us 2.5, 3 hours to read through it at that point. And it was read with such passion and commitment by a fine group of actors. And not only did I learn about where I could make cuts and improve the screenplay, but it was an inspiration to me to stick with it. And I knew at that moment, if I didn't know it before, that I would make this film, because it was so compelling and so moving that evening. And all these kind of hard-boiled veteran actors, some of which are in this and some of which were not available to be in it now, they would have the tears just rolling down their cheeks at the end of that reading, and I knew this is going to be done and I'm going to stick with it. And I guess I got to a point in the mid-'80s when I realized that in order for it to be done, it couldn't be like the next project. I couldn't be working on something else and try to set it up. I had to clear the deck, do nothing else, and concentrate full-time on it to get it done, and that's what it took. It took me not doing anything else and focusing almost exclusively on this for it to happen.
I'm wondering how, I mean, I'm so impressed with the cast. It's just amazing. You see Stephen Lang when he was riding in front of the troops with his sword, and he was Pickett, you know, and Martin Sheen is Lee, Tom Berenger, so into this role. I'm wondering how you feel about all these people. I mean, is it almost like a dream come true? Is it walking with ghosts for you? What is it?
Well, they're all family now. I love these people. I love the characters they've created, and I love them as actors and as people. This has been just a once-in-a-lifetime experience for all of us, and we've cherished every moment. Every day on the set, I've said, wow, I'll never have this day again. I want to enjoy this day. I want to make the most of this day. I want to do my finest work. And every actor, every crew member in this production has had that attitude about it, that it's just a very special occasion. We feel an obligation, a very deep sense of obligation to the historical moment, to the fact that we're talking about a subject that belongs to all Americans and in a larger sense to all people, what happened at Gettysburg. So we have a kind of an obligation to this family of man when we talk about this story, and we can't be flippant about it. We got to be serious in our purpose about how we approach it, and at the same so it's created a kind of an esprit de corps, a very potent esprit de corps here on the part of the crew and the cast, that we want to get it right. We'll make mistakes. We are making mistakes, but we're trying not to, and we're trying to get it right. And as I say, historically, in authenticity, in the moral universe, in the spirit of it, and to tell a story of what really happened here. And this esprit de corps is very manifest, and we're very close. We've come very, very close, and we know that this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I feel as a filmmaker that I'm so lucky because I've got the finest group of actors I could have dreamed to have. And I thought of other actors in different roles over the years. It's been almost 15 years. But the way it's worked out, I can't imagine other people playing any other roles than who have played. They have owned, they have inhabited these characters, they have made these characters their own. And I think the cumulative effect, I believe, is going to be very potent.
The biggest single cast member, or the reenactors, I guess, as a group, they're like the biggest cast, the most important almost cast member, I think, as a group. And sort of your history with reenactors, what you've tried to do in this production, not to accommodate, but to give respect to their needs and their and why that's important, or their requirements for production, for authenticity and things like this. I mean, if you could just get a little bit of the history of that.
Well, you know, I believe that this whole adventure starts with ghosts, because Michael Shara heard the voices, and I knew Michael very well. He died in '88, so we had 8 years where we had a lot of communication together. And Michael Shara, of course, wrote the novel, The Killer Angels. And he heard voices, and when he first came to the battlefield, he had a vision, the way Joan of Arc had a vision of Pickett's and his divisions coming up the hill to Cemetery Ridge. And when I read the book years later, he wrote it in '74, I read it in '78, I saw it vividly through his text. He was a vehicle for me to come to the Battle of Gettysburg. The same way that we, all of us, myself and Turner Organization, will be a vehicle for millions of people to come to this battle. But I had to hear the voice, and Ted Turner had to hear some voice. You need to ask him what he heard and how he heard, but he had to hear something. So we're all coming to it hearing voices and having a sense of mission to tell this story. And the reenactors clearly have heard their voices. The ghosts have talked to the reenactors because they went out over the last 15, 20 years, as long as there's been this kind of reenacting movement, and went out into the fields, and went out into Shiloh and Manassas and Chickamauga and Lookout Mountain and Gettysburg and started to do something called reenacting. And some people laugh at them. Some people think, how can grown men put on, you know, uniforms and play soldier? And laugh at them if you want to. But although there's a lot of humor in this endeavor, and there's certainly a lot of humor in visiting reenactments, I don't find myself laughing at them because they are living embodiments. They are of the 19th century. They're almost like ambassadors of the 19th century to the 20th. And again, relating to what I said earlier, that's not that far away. We are also 19th century people as well as 20th century people. And the next generation or the next century, people will be looking back to us, and are they going to be looking at us like those, you know, silly, what do we have to do with 20th century people? No, we're all connected. We're connected by time to the past and the present. We're connected horizontally to all the people on the planet, in all cultures and all times. We're connected to all living things. I believe this. You know, we're connected to all living things, to the animals. We're connected in time to the past and the present. And this thing of reenactors is, again, just an embodiment of this kind of feeling that we are with those people and with their concerns. And when you sit down in the encampments, as I have visited during the reenactments, sit around the campfires and you hear people playing harmonicas or banjos, and they're debating the issues of this particular battle or this particular... It's something very poignant and sweet about it. And if it wasn't for the reenacted movements, this film could not be made. There's no way anybody could afford to put 4,000 men in the field with weapons and cannons and so forth, which they bring to it. So again, I can't say this too much, that it's beyond what they look like. It's not just the uniform and the musket, it's the feeling. Now, if you went and uniformed and propped people in, you know, extras someplace, or, you know, like at one point I was considering doing this in Eastern Europe, it seemed like the only place to do it in the early 80s. You'd never have the feeling you have. You'd have people walking around with rifles and uniforms. These people living and breathing the Civil War. So when we had a scene, for instance, with Marty Sheen playing Lee, he rode out, these troops went around him, they were crying out, Lee and Virginia, and they were reaching out to touch him, and it bounced off him, and it bounced back to them, and there was a synergy. It was mystical. And we have many scenes in the film like that, where the energy that the reenactors have brought to it has fed what the actors are doing it and gave it a beyond an authenticity, a feeling, this intense emotional feeling and passion. So I think in the end of it, all of us hearing these kind of voices of the ghosts have now been embodied by the reenactors, by the actors, and the ghosts now have, in fact, been given a voice. So all these things we've heard in our subconscious or in our sleep or in our dream world, an audience will hear it's being enacted out by Marty Sheen, by Tom Berenger, by Stephen Lang, by Richard Jordan, as Pickett, as Armistead, as Lee, and they are now living in the mythic world of that film brings, you know, that film brings to us and to future generations.
Pickett's charge me, in particular, the day on the park. I don't even want to ask you a question because I don't want to lead you in any way. Is there anything that you want to say about that day?
Well, I'll tell you, that was about as emotional and mystical a day as I've ever had, and there have been a few on this production. I mean, there hasn't been a day where we haven't got the chills about something that's going on. Even here at the Lutheran Theological Seminary, where Buford went up to this cupola to look out over the battle on the first day. You cannot go up that staircase and tell me there's no ghosts up there and you don't get some kind of feeling. You got to be pretty stone cold not to feel it. And this whole area, of course, just being in the battlefield as we were on the first day of Pickett's charge, the actual battlefield, I mean, the ground resonates with energy. And one of the reenactors said as they left the tree line, the actual tree line where the Confederates left on the afternoon of July 3rd, 1863, as they left the tree line, they were giving the rebel yell, but they heard this echo from behind them of 15,000 voices. Now, there were only 3,600 guys there that day, so the echo they heard were the 15,000 ghosts of the men who actually did the charge. Now, every day I hear stories like this, and you know, you can laugh at it, But I've been here, and I understand what people are talking about, and I've been coming here for many years now, and we did Pickett's Charge over 6 days. It was Monday through Saturday, which will distill down to about 10 minutes of film. And on the Friday and Saturday, we got into the angle. Finally, we worked our way up the field, across the Gettysburg Road, in the final charge, and into the what they call the Bloody Angle by the copse of trees. And that particular day, I remember Richard Jordan, who's been a friend of mine for 20 years, more than 20 years, and he's helped me, been a supporter of mine on this project for at least 10 years, who played Armistead, and magnificently played Armistead. He looked at me and he said, "Ron, this is the hardest day I've ever had as an actor." Because he had to run, it was like, I don't know how hot it was, but it was hot and humid, you were there. And I had to run across that field, and we were doing it that particular day in big, long takes with a lot of cameras, the final charge with thousands of men at the angle. And it was physically draining, but I think what he meant, I know what he meant, was not just how physically draining it was, but how emotionally draining it was to play Armistead, and he had become Armistead by that point, to put that hat on the sword and lead those men and say, "Virginians, follow me, who will follow me?" and to lead them in the final space of death and destruction into the angle and go over the wall. And it was very, very, very emotional to see the flags of the Confederacy go up there and one by one fall. And then when we were done filming it, all the reenactors spontaneously and without a cue knelt, and Brian Pohanka, our historical advisor, said, "Let's just have a moment of silence for the brave men who fell at Gettysburg." I tell you, there was not a dry eye anywhere around the vicinity.
I'd like to turn it back on you. Is there anything that I've missed? Is there anything that you want out there?
Well, you know, it's been a long road, and to get this project made, and I'm enjoying very much the making of it now. I'm enjoying it shot by shot. Every shot I'm saying, let's make the best shot we can and really get the moment here. The actors have that attitude, and I'm just so grateful that that such a magnificent crew and cast has come together on this. And you know, I realized, if I didn't know it before, and I kind of had a sense of it for a long time, but it came home to me again very vividly, very powerfully. This isn't my project. This is our project, and I mean our, meaning, you know, in the sense of being a citizen, or it belongs to the country. And I'm very lucky that I've had a part to play in it. But I've always felt like a sense of to play my role as someone who has to help bring it together. But everyone involved in this has owned it. Every member of the crew, every cast member, all the people at Turner Organization, and I'm just delighted that the story is being told. And I think that it'll be a healing experience to see this film. It should be. I think that through all the death and destruction and murder and mayhem and the tragedy of it all, there will be a catharsis, again coming back to the Greeks, and it'll be very healing to relive what our ancestors lived through, and to feel it as a part of who we are as a people.